what we're going to do is myofascial palpation. So I've shown this on a lot of other videos, but we have our hands on the tissue, and it's not scary. I say make it feel like a massage, and we're just coming in a cross fiber direction, and we're feeling for ropey bands where there's shortening and tightness. And you can watch the animal, and they'll kind of give you a look, or their respiration will change, something like that. And so that gives us information about their history and their changes in weight bearing. And I know you know this because you do massage and stuff too. But it again, it's not that there's just a tight muscle and that's, oh well, that just happened out of the blue. It's like, oh, why is that muscle tender and tense? And then when we follow that, we'll usually see it in patterns. So it's not usually one muscle in isolation, but rather what we call a strain pattern. And that is like a recording in the body of what's been happening in their life and how they've maybe compensated or just off weighted, or they've just, like it's like with us, if our shoulders get really tense, if we tend to have migraines, that could go up into our neck and into our head and produce a headache, produce a migraine. So things will start off, and then these patterns, just it doesn't take much over time to incite that, oh God, okay, I know now I'm going to have this problem until I get a massage or do whatever, stretch, all these things. With the hip problems, what I see whatever, over and over again, is that when we're palpating the inner aspect of the pelvic limb, that the gracilis muscle, the pectineus, these medial muscles on the inside tend to be tight. So if we're like, well, this dog has a pelvic limb lameness, we're palpating. If I notice that, then I'm not as concerned about the stifle or the knee. I'm more concerned about the hip, because back to the soft tissue and your question, yes, when the hip starts to go awry, what's an inciting factor for that arthritis piece? Well, there's the ligaments are loose. There's ligamentous laxity. There's also probably some atrophy or some non-firing of those muscles around the hip. So we're going to have too much movement in that hip joint. What's the natural reaction from the body to keep that limbs more stable? These inner muscles are going to fire. And so it's about just educating people and veterinarians and all that. What can we find with our hands that will give us information way, way sooner than we have a lot of joint deformity?
Yeah, I think that's like, so I'm quite lucky because I didn't really discover the integrative approach till a lot later in my career. So I'd already been a vet for 10 years by that point. And I was taught arthritis in a very pharmaceutical, surgical, standardized approach. And never really thought about muscles and ligaments and tendons and their role. Very focused on joint, cartilage, the joints. So I ended up doing a course that kind of highlighted how important the soft tissues around said joints and elsewhere in the body are. And that, as you say, you can use them to help with diagnosis, but you're also treating them to alleviate discomfort and use the limbs, rest of the body appropriately. So let's kind of explore that just a little bit. Let's start with, as you've been doing, using it as a diagnostic tool. And I'm just gonna say this because for me it was mind-blowing. Bear in mind I've been a vet for 10 years. Palpating just behind the ears as a dog comes into the consult room and feeling tension and going, there's a problem. And when people, so the vet's talking to you, you've come in with vomiting and diarrhea, you've got a tooth problem, there's something else, and you palpate behind the ears, and you're like, and you've got musculoskeletal issues going on, and you're like, oh, I can't talk about it now because you've come in for something else. But developing that skill over the last 10 years has just been mind-blowing for me.